And now we swap back to Swedish. Vi går in på...
Okay, that brings us to the next item, item number 15. That's women with disabilities. I'll start by giving the floor to the rapporteur. That's Mrs. Werthmann. You have the floor.
Ja, danke schön, Herr Vorsitzender. Der Bericht ist...
Thank you very much, Chairman. As it's turned out, the report is in fact a very important one, very significant. Some 50% of Europe's population, let's not forget, live with disabilities, and some 80% live in countries and member states where they can be considered as disadvantaged. The situation of women with disabilities is difficult because very often they are discriminated against on a number of fronts, socially, in terms of education, financially, there's a disadvantage, and discriminated against in terms of health, employment. And I think they're more fragile or vulnerable, also in terms of stereotypes. I've had a certain number of expressions explained to me by the women concerned, and it's caused me to reflect that this kind of expression is still used, or these kinds of expression are still used. We've tried to come up with a very balanced report. Last week we had a hearing. It was very interesting. The report met with a favourable reception. One or two suggestions were made for improvements, which I'm quite happy to pick up and include in the report. And I think it shows how important this issue is. And also, I think, flags up the wide variety of issues involved. But I think women with disabilities don't really receive enough acknowledgement or recognition. I think the content of the report is sufficiently familiar to members of the committee, so I won't go into any detail, but I'm very keen to hear what kind of a reaction the report has met with or any suggestions they have to make.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Mrs. Gomay first.
First of all, I'm very thankful that we could have this public hearing, which really gave, I believe, our rapporteur a lot of great impetus. And actually, of course, we know that when we talk about crisis, we talk about women are affected as silent crisis. But if we talk about disabled women, then even they are more silent and they are not visible because we have a lot of member states who they cannot still have the proper move, I would say. So that's why I believe it is very important to put a special attention and highlight this problem, because if we saw the different field, if you just see disabled women on the labor market, then they are much less on the labor market. If you see the treatment on the health, so I believe it is extremely important just to highlight. And of course, as we had a year of disability for some time ago, there is a serious difference between disabled men and disabled women as well. And actually, if you see that within this parliament, the first disabled is a man. So to become a member of parliament or any legislation, it's very difficult for a disabled woman. So it's easier for a disabled man to reach this goal. So I'm sure that Angela is going to do a good report, and this public hearing really gave a lot of good impetus for all of us.
Next is Mrs. Papadopoulou. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, indeed. There was a hearing last week in Strasbourg, and it was very interesting because all of us who were present believed that this is a very good and balanced report. Women with disabilities, I fully agree with Zita that they suffer twofold discrimination as women because of gender inequalities, but also as persons with disabilities. They are very invisible in the media, and also they have particular problems. Very often they face violence from people in their own family environment, even from carers, and this is something they cannot do anything about. and this is something we should have in mind. They need to be treated equally and as other people with disabilities. We have tabled some amendments. Actually, we stress the fact that there are women and girls with disabilities. This is one of the areas we pointed out. And as far as the impact of the economic crisis on girls and women with disabilities, we put a few amendments because indeed at times of economic crisis and austerity measures and budgetary cuts and all these social cuts, women with disabilities do suffer because they are among the vulnerable people. And also, we stress that all the member states must ensure equal opportunities for them to participate in education, training, employment as a means of enhancing their personal development, independence, and social inclusion. They have the right to pregnancy and maternity, even with their disabilities, and so they need special care when they are pregnant. And also, we must ensure special training of all professionals dealing with people with disabilities. They need special training, how to treat them, how to listen to them, how to respond to their specific needs. And we must definitely ensure that there is efficient and easy access to justice for all, especially for women and girls with disabilities as a particularly vulnerable group. Targeted research and collection of data are essential in order to have efficient policies and design. And strengthening the recognition and understanding of the intersectionality of gender and disability in EU and member states. Overall, I will say that this is a very good report. It puts all the various areas, it includes everything, including combating prejudice and sterilization agreements. It goes beyond a lot of issues and it covers them in a satisfactory manner. So we look forward to a good report.
Tack för det.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Esteras will be next.
Sí, gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the rapporteur for her report, and I would like to tell you about our amendments. It would be a good idea to talk about women and girls with disabilities because that's how it's phrased in international treaties. So there's mention of both women and girls because there's often a slightly different take depending on whether they're women or girls. Not only are we talking about physical disabilities, but also learning difficulties and psychosocial disabilities. We don't use the word minusvalía in Spanish. It would be the equivalent of handicap in English. We now talk about disabilities. We talk about full accessibility, not only from an architectural point of view, but also for universal accessibility design that applies to transport, to technology, public services, private services, as well as education. The same applies to any kind of machinery, electronic ticket machines, gynecology practices that are adapted to women with disabilities and accessibility to the internet as well. The relevant committee is looking at the issue of accessibility to the digital era. We've tabled relevant amendments because this is a very important point in time and we want to make sure that people with disabilities can access the internet and women in particular. It's not just the visual aspect but also adapt the complexity of something. If a girl has Down syndrome and she wants to access the web content, then it has to be adapted with more straightforward content, and the same might apply to other categories of disability. Internet access from a content point of view is very important so that people with learning difficulties can understand. If there are videos, then there should be sign language used, if there's complex content, and so on and so forth. And of course, healthcare professionals need lifelong learning to make sure that they can provide the right care to women with disabilities. And the same applies to mental illness and learning difficulties. Society is more understanding when it comes to learning difficulties, but there's more of a stigma when it's a mental health problem. And public health care systems need to be able to identify who the vulnerable groups are who have special needs in order to make sure that proper care is provided to them. On the issue of maternity, we've asked for extended maternity leave for women with disabilities. We think this is absolutely vital because they have additional challenges to contend with. They have more challenges to deal with than a woman without disabilities. And of course, they need to be able to enjoy their sexuality freely, and we need to make sure that there aren't obstacles along the way, because unfortunately we don't see women with disabilities as women, and we need to break this taboo. We need to make sure that they have access to information on reproduction, family planning, and they have the right to maintain their fertility in the same way as other women who don't have a disability. So the aspect of sexuality is extremely important. That is why women and girls with disabilities who are in institution need medical care and health care which is tailored to their needs. We have tabled amendments to make sure that contraception is not given to them or abortion is not offered to them if the woman with disability does not want it. There is a UN convention that covers this. The UN says you cannot decide anything about disability without the input of those who have a disability. And of course, issues that are very important and relevant here are abortion, sterilization, and if this were to be offered, it needs to be with the consent of the individual concerned. This is linked to human rights. And in some cases, this would have to be replaced by the family consent or guardian consent. We would like to appeal to the member states to include indicators that reflect the gender dimension. We need more data and more statistics that not only factor in the gender aspect, but also the combination of gender plus disability. We need to make sure that the regular reports on human rights of the EU and the individual member states always include information on women and girls with disabilities. This will provide us with more indicators and will give us a clearer snapshot of what the situation is at the moment. And then, of course, we need to constantly combat violence against these girls. We need to take legislative and administrative measures as well as social and educational measures in order to protect women and girls with disabilities, not only within their home but outside as well. And we need to protect them against any type of violence, exploitation or abuse in order to make sure that they have full access to justice if they need that. We believe that the European Social Fund is a very effective tool to improve integration and inclusion of these women and girls that can make sure that they can enter the labour market. In Geneva, there was a working party, and I did have the opportunity to attend their meetings. And they're trying to appeal to companies and administrations in order to make changes to their posts so that jobs can be suitable for people with disabilities. And not to make these changes would be tantamount to discrimination. Individuals with disabilities, but especially women who are doubly disabled, have to be equal before the law, and this of course includes girls, and they have to have the same benefits as any of us. Europe is the cradle of human rights, and the principle of equality must be a common thread that runs through all our actions. And I hope that this report will be a reference in order to fulfill the dreams of so many women and girls that have a disability, no matter what disability this is. And of course, this also applies to people with mental health problems. It is only in this way that we can say we are honouring the principle of equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll turn to the Commission. Maybe you would like to come in at this point?
Thank you very much. First of all, the Commission would like to thank the rapporteur for the draft report. And the Commission would like to say that it is aware of the issues raised and that these issues are already discussed in a study that was commissioned in 2007 and that fed into the European Disability Strategy of 2010 and also the list of key actions that are envisaged for the period 2010-2015. So the overall aim of the European Disability Strategy is to empower people with disabilities so that they can enjoy their full rights and that they can also fully participate in all aspects of life, in the society, in the economy, as individuals, as consumers, as students, as workers, and also as political actors. So the strategy sets clear objectives to remove barriers that persons with disabilities face in many areas of everyday life, and it also provides tools to implement the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Also, I would like to say that a report on the implementation of the disability strategy is under preparation and it will be published later this year. Gender is also mainstreamed into all the actions of the European Disability Strategy. And also the gender aspect will also be dealt with in the Commission's report on the implementation of the strategy. Thank you very much.
Tack så mycket för det.
Thank you very much. So maybe we'll have some closing words from Mrs. Werthmann.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank all those who've contributed to the debate. And I think that together with the amendments, we can turn this into a very good report. And I hope that we have been able to take on board all these issues. At least we've done our best to do that.
Thank you very much. So I'll tell you the schedule for this opinion.